So let's talk about do-it-yourself cold calling. And Deal Machine, guys, is one of the tools that we use every single day in our business. Like, there's not
Yeah.
one day that doesn't go by where I don't open the Deal Machine app. Why? What am I doing? Is I'm constantly driving for dollars. So whenever you're out and about, if you're not doing this, you're missing out on money. When you're out and about, just going through your daily life, taking the kids to school, going to the grocery store, going to the gym, start paying attention to the properties around you, right? And you want to look for signs of distress, run down, beat up, old, vacant, those type of things, and pull out your Deal Machine app, add those properties to your list. And my rule is if I add it to my list, I'm going to call them right there. Literally, while I'm sitting in front of the house, if I click add to list, I'm going to give them a phone call to see if I can catch that person on the phone, right? And sometimes you actually get that person on the phone, and you can actually work out a deal with them. So do it yourself cold calling, right? You're going to build a list, and you can build that list easily in Deal Machine. But I'd like to tell people follow the 2% rule. What's the 2% rule? 98% of property owners you talk to are not motivated. Don't take it personal, right? They're going to sell their property in the retail market. Why? Because why would they sell it at a discount when they don't have to? You're looking for the 2%. That's why I call it the 2% rule, that life is happening to, right? Life happens to us all. So what does that look like? Someone that's going through a divorce, someone who just had a death in the family, someone who just got laid off, where something is happening that's causing them to be a motivated seller, where they need to sell this house quickly because they've had a major life event. And you can be that help to help them get through this situation, right? So what I did is I blocked off 1 hour every day. And even Krystal, when she first started, she was cold calling, even though it terrified
Right.
her. I had a script in front of me, and I went through that script, and I just called people. And at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. Like Matt talked about earlier, the more people you call, the higher the likelihood of you running into a motivated seller. So the person who calls 100 people is more likely to find a seller that's motivated than the person who calls 20. The person who calls 1,000 people is 10 times more likely to get a lead than the person who only calls 100, and so on and so on. 10,000 phone calls is strictly a numbers game. So I remember I used to take it personal, like, oh, I called 200 people today and I only got one lead. Guess what? You got to call more people, or you got to call more consistently. At the end of the day, it's not personal. It's not even about your skill level. It's about the volume of people that you're talking to. So that's do it yourself cold calling. You guys can use the dialer and deal machine. Super powerful. I mean, Matt can probably talk about this more, but the AI that's built into the dialer, the sentiment analysis. When he was explaining this to me, I'm like, sentiment analysis? What are you talking about? He was like, the deal machine dialer will listen to your conversation, and afterwards it will take notes and tell you the tone and the tenor of the conversation. So if it's a hot lead, deal machine's gonna be like, hey, that was a hot lead, or is it a warm, or is it a cold? That is crazy. I think it's going to get to a point, guys, with this AI technology where the AI is going to be making calls for us and generating leads and locking up deals. It's sooner than later. AI is going to be making the calls for you, right? But for right now, we still got to do it ourselves. All right, let's go on to the next one. You want to talk about this one?
So us starting out, for anyone who is getting started out, and you'll hear what we're doing right after this. Literally, what we do, who we use for our cold calling, our paper lead, all of that, who we use, and what we get. What are the results? But started out, we didn't start that way, right? So we ain't gonna say, oh yeah, you need to be doing this if you want leads, when that's not how we got started, and we still got leads that way, right? The money done grew a little bit, just a little bit, not that much, but the money done, it ain't funny like it was last time when we first got started. But when we first got started, we went to Fiverr, and we went to online jobs PH, and we were hiring people from there for our cold calling, right? Typically paying 44 to $8 an hour. And there's one thing we didn't do because we didn't know was how to track metrics. We didn't know anything about that, right?
And if you know me, we was paying $4 an hour.
Exactly. And if you know anything about him also,
You
when
get
we
what you pay for.
there you go. So it wasn't until we got into a mastermind and we was like, yeah, well, we got people cold calling, we're not seeing any traction. And then somebody has said to me, where are you monitoring them? And I was like, monitoring them, like what? Like, I talked to him. Yeah, I talked to him. No, are you monitoring their calls? And I was like, oh, no. And it was like, you need to go monitor their calls, listen to their calls, find out what's going on. So of course I went back, started listening to the calls, and I was like, well, I be damned.
That's why we ain't
This
getting
why
no
we ain't getting
leads.
no damn leads.
The
Lord.
accent was just too thick. and they couldn't really connect with the
Exactly. But
this particular
we
call.
had been with them for maybe 6, 7 months before we understood that. And it wasn't until we got
The
into that
wasted.
mastermind until they really broke down like who we should be looking for. So then we hired, fired, and then rehired. Same sites, but now when we interview, we make sure we knew what we were looking for. And those were the goals at the time: 2 leads per day. We started monitoring their calls. Then we started coaching them as well on the side. Now you fast forward and who we are using today and the metrics. So anyone who don't have cold callers, do have cold callers and don't know, listen, what should I be measuring? This is actually from the stats from our cold caller, right?
Yeah, so this is actually a monthly stats from one of our cold calls. I know the number's a little small, but the bottom right says the total calls they made for the month. This is one cold caller, 22,946 calls. That is one person on the dialer just nonstop. They would typically hit between 800 and 1,000 calls a day. I can never do that, right? Especially not hand dialing. But you get like none of us can ever make that many calls. That's what how hiring a professional cold caller. They generated 41 leads that wanted to sell their house in 1 month, but it took them 23,000 calls. So when I say it's a numbers game, this is what I mean, right? It's a numbers game.
So when you look at the dispositions, right, you should know how many hangups, how many no answers, how many wrong numbers, not interested, busy. That'll also tell you a lot about the numbers, the phone numbers you're using. Is your number being flagged, right? If you're getting a lot of no
Spam.
answers, hang-ups, things of that nature, you'll know like, hey, it's about time for us to change the number. Um, so this is really what you should be looking for from your cold caller. These exact metrics. You could take a screenshot of it. Hopefully you guys can see it. But this is what we get every week. Do
Yeah,
they
they
send
send
this
us a
over?
weekly review of their stats and also monthly of how they're performing on these cold calls. So again, this is a hiring a professional trained cold caller. You don't have to train them; they already know what to say. All you literally do is pull the list in Deal Machine, right? Deal Machine has all the leads, all the data, all the phone numbers. You have that list into the dialer, and you have that cold caller work inside a Deal Machine on the dialer. Um, Part time, it's about $1,300 a month for a part time cold caller, 20 hours a week. And full time is $2,000 a month through this particular company. But for us, well worth it.
Yep. And then we've also had, so these are numbers, and Dedrick will get into this just for the month of December for us. We have students who have hired them and they've hired them part time. They did it part time for like, they've set a budget aside, and we teach them like have a budget going into it, right? Where you put that money aside. And then from the deals within those 60 days, you'll know if you can continue, you can extend them. Or like one of our students had set aside for 2 months. They ended up getting, I think it was like 25 leads. And by the time they closed their first lead from their batch of ones that they contracted, I think it was only like a month lapse. So they were able to,
Fund the rest of their
from their funds, they were able to keep the cold callers going.
for the company that we use is called Start Virtual. So again, month of December, we had two cold callers. One got almost 23,000 calls that resulted in 41 leads, right? The other one made 22,000 calls, got us 36 leads. Guys, I would never be able to physically call 23,000 people, but I can damn sure talk to 41 people who want to sell, right? Who would rather talk to the warm leads and like, hey, I want to sell. And then now it's just all about your rapport building, your acquisition skills, and building a relationship and finding out how you can solve their problem.
So the good thing with us is with our investment strategy, we are opportunistic investors. So each one of these leads, you know how they say, oh, find a motivated seller, where a motivated seller is great for wholesaling. A seller who just wants to sell is great for creative financing, seller finance. So if you find a motivated seller, that's a wholesale deal. If you find someone who don't need to sell, they just want to sell, that's creative financing, right? That's seller finance. So for us, we can take down any deal regardless of where they are at, right? We're paying retail, we're paying what they're asking for creative finance deals. So we're rarely losing leads unless they're just outrageous, right? Where they have a sentimental value attached to their number versus a realistic number.
And you want to explain to folks who maybe knew what seller financing is?
So what seller finance is when a seller is when you go directly to a seller, not a bank, but you go directly
No
to that
realtor.
seller, no realtor, anyone involved, and you literally offer them, well, you give them your offer price for that property. You negotiate with them on purchasing the property, and they hold the note to this purchase, right? So you're not having to go to a bank and say, "Hey, listen, let me put certain percent down." I think for our deals, we put less than 2% down.
On average.
On
Now,
average, our down payments are less than 2%,
and
right?
we're able to pay retail. So with seller financing, let's say the person is asking $400,000 for the house. And as a cash offer, you run your numbers through the cash offer formula and you're at 220. Obviously there's a big gap, and most times 99% of the time they're going to say no. I'm asking 400, you're offering me 220. Hell no, right? Is what they usually say. But with seller financing, assuming the house is paid off, that's the cleanest way to do it. You can say, okay, I'll give you the 400,000. I'm going to give you, let's say, $10,000 as a down payment. We'll create a promissory note and a mortgage, and then I'll pay you, let's say, 1,500 bucks a month for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So in that way, you're able to give that seller what their asking price is versus giving them a wholesale price. But as long as they allow you to make payments over time. So
And of
that's
course, it doesn't have to be like a $10,000 down payment, right?
it could be
So
5,000, it
if
could be a
anyone
thousand.
who's seen our first season, just to give you realistic numbers to say when people be like, "Oh, no way is anyone going to do that." Yes, they will. I'll give you an example for some of you guys who've seen it. Our first season, the season finale, it might have been the season finale, the 4 unit that we did. We put down how much on that property?
So it was a
Seller finance.
4 unit apartment. The seller was asking $160,000. We bought it, seller finance. It was paid off, no mortgage. We bought it with $5,000 down, a 4 unit apartment.
And we were paying $700 a month,
750 a month
750
mortgage payment
a mortgage payment. 4 units that was all rented.
on an entire apartment building. When we bought it, the rents were already 2,000 a month. So it was already bringing in 2,000. So we just paid 750. We had some, we were already cash flowing just from day one. And why would that one seller want to sell? He was older. He didn't want to fix anything. And he was like, look, I'm not taking 120,000 cash that you're offering me, but if you give me 160, we can do it. I said, okay, I'll give you 160. I'd have to do it like this. I'll give you 5,000 down, 750 bucks a month for the next 8 years. And then whenever 8 years is up, I'll still owe you some money. And what I'll do is I'll just do a balloon payment and just cash you out. He said, write up the contract.
And 0% interest.
Oh yeah, 0% interest.
0% interest. And our payments to him didn't start for I think another 7 months because we said, "Hey, listen, we got to get in here and fix this property up."
Yeah, if you've seen season one, that
Then
episode,
then
the
you
house
know.
needed a ton of
Right,
repairs.
right,
That's
right.
another reason he was willing to sell it on creative finance terms because he knew in the retail market he wouldn't be able to get that. So the return on investment is amazing from hiring cold callers. Another method is pay per lead. So pay per lead is there's literally companies that spend millions of dollars on ads so that when someone types in "sell my house fast Tampa" or "sell my house fast Charlotte," their website pops up. And when someone fills out a form says, "Hey, I want to sell my house quickly," you can pay for those leads. So you go to these companies, you say, "Hey, I'm willing to pay $100 a lead or $200 a lead," and you put some money into, say you put $500 or $1,000 into that budget, they'll send you leads as they come in through their website. So these leads are very, very quick. They come in quickly. You decide on the budget. Typically, our cost is about $150 per lead, but you can literally begin leads in a matter of hours or days through this method
Yeah.
of pay per lead.
So for us, we spend, like you said, about 150 per lead. We have a budget of about 2,000 a month for our pay per lead, which has gotten us about 13 leads
Per month
per
and about one
month.
deal per month. Yep. So as you scale your spend, you get more leads and more potential deals to close that way. Some of the best practices is, like I said, extremely quick. When you upload money, it's an auction system. You win the auction, you get the next lead that comes in, whether it's $100, $200. Now the leads are not cheap. Depending on your market and how competitive your market is, it could be $100 a lead. It could be $500 a lead if you're in a bigger competitive city. So if you do this method, you want to make sure that your acquisitions process, which is your process of speaking with the seller, uncovering their pain points, getting the property locked up on the contract, has to be tight. You have to have a tight, streamlined process. But the sales cycle on these pay per leads tends to be quicker. Why? Because these people are actually searching for a way to sell their house quickly. They went on Google and put into a search, I need to sell my house fast. So they're looking for a way out of that property.
Thanks for listening to the Deal Machine Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please leave us a review and follow along wherever you're listening to your podcast.